Morning, everyone.
Morning, Brian.
Happy Wednesday, I think it is. Yeah, Wednesday.
You look like you're in a bunker somewhere.
Always prepared, sir. Always prepared. The internet in the office is terrible.
Yeah.
And if more than two of us are on a video thing like this, it doesn't work. So I'm in my basement, and we'll be going in as soon as this is over. We've tried everything to make it better. I don't know what we can do. I think it's just the building itself is not great.
Do other departments have the same problem?
Yeah, it's a shared office space, and there's so few people there during the week that it's usually not a problem unless a bunch of people are doing video.
Gotcha.
So days like this, like a Tuesday morning, it could be potentially bad. So in order to just mitigate that, I'm here.
Brian, you think we should flip C and D, get the slate out of the way because that's a vote, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Makes perfect sense.
Okay.
Let me pull all of this stuff up. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Do, do, do. Share, share. Okay. Okay. Morning, everyone. Thanks for joining. Let me see what we got here. Oh, good morning, Jackie Goddard. How are you, ma'am? Hope the knee is better.
It's much better, Brian. Thanks. You're nice to ask.
Thanks for being with us. And folks, if you could just put your name and your community in the chat, that would just help us with the attendance as I do some counting here. 1, 2, 3, 4. Whoa, fast and furious. Welcome Isabella McKinnon, who's joining us from the office.
Good morning.
She got to be in the office this morning, so hopefully the internet works for you.
Yes, and it's a lot warmer today.
Oh, good. We had no heat yesterday either, so um, it's getting better. It's getting better though. All right, Mr. Mayor,
Are you
we
there?
have a quorum, so whenever you're ready, sir.
Okay. Well, let's get started. We'll call the meeting of February 5th, MBTA Advisory Board Full Board Meeting to order. At this time, do you have a flag, Brian?
Yes, can you see
And
that?
yes, beautiful. I ask everybody to join with me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And I'd ask everyone, just join me in a moment of silence for keep in mind our veterans serving around the globe, also those people that are suffering across the world through violence and war. Thank you, everybody. First item on the agenda would be the minutes from December 10th. Those are in the packets. Any questions on the minutes? Anybody? We had Chair McGee with us at that meeting. It was a good meeting. See no questions. I'll accept the motion, accept the minutes, approve the minutes.
I make the motion.
Have a second?
Second.
Great. All those in favor? Aye. Hands up. Opposed? Abstentions? Seeing none, the minutes pass.
Roy
Oops.
Epstein abstained. I couldn't make that meeting.
All right, duly noted. Thank you, Roy. The next item on the agenda, I'd like to switch it, essentially flip C and D. So we get the vote done and then we'll go into the Brian update on the task force. So any objection to that? Seeing none. We have the action to elect the slate of officers, committee members. I think all of that is in your packet. Brian, do you want to expound on that or?
I'd be happy to, and again, thank you everyone for volunteering to do this with 178 communities. I think everyone understands that the ability to get the work of the organization done is best done through smaller groups via committee, and I appreciate everyone volunteering their time. I often say that the fact that Massachusetts government runs on volunteerism is remarkable, and what's more remarkable is the fact that people do it, and you all are emblematic of that. So thank you. We have the same number of committees proposed this year as in the past. A few changes at the very top. Dan Carty has agreed very generously to serve as co-treasurer with Colette, who is serving as the chair of her select board this year, which limits her time and all that she does. Everything else is more or less the same. There's a few moves around committee chairs and vice chairs. We've worked this time around to elevate elected officials more to chairpersonships, I should say, if possible, because it helps amplify the voice of the organization. And I think as folks understand, in a democracy, it's important that we have elected officials certainly leading us. The only other major change is at the request of the Commuter Rail Committee. We're proposing to change the name of that to the Passenger and Regional Rail Committee to reflect more of the aspirations of the system to move towards a less 9 to 5 and more sort of round the clock face service. Otherwise, things are more or less the same. The committee charges, which are at the very bottom, also remain the same. And I just wanted to also express my gratitude for the committee chairs who are agreeing to continue to serve, and to those who are stepping up for the first time. The staff, we will do our best to make this as painless and as manageable as possible. We have a master schedule that is being finalized and will be published this week for the remainder of the calendar year, so that everyone will know sort of what what's going on, and we will again strive to make this as painless for everyone as possible. So, sir, I thank you for that, and we are requesting as your staff that someone please move the approval of this slate. And with that, it would be completed. And I guess the only final request, sir, if I might, is there is one vacancy on the bylaw committee. If anyone is interested, please either volunteer now or let us know. That committee plans to meet twice this year in November and December to bring forward proposed changes to the bylaws that this organization will consider in December. So with that, sir, I appreciate it and turn it back to you.
Thank you, Brian, and I want to thank everybody that has really put some time in. I know that we restructured just a couple of years ago. I appreciate Brian's leadership. I appreciate all those folks that have stepped up and agreed to be chairs. And, I think we're doing very, very well as an advisory board. We're well organized, and I believe we have much greater credibility these days. Therefore, when we do communicate with the T and others, they listen and they're paying attention to the contributions and thoughts and ideas of the board. So I appreciate that. If anybody wants to join on the bylaw committee, you can reach out to Brian. Any questions on this? If not, I certainly would accept the motion to accept the slate as presented.
Mr. Chair, this is Roy Epstein. Brian, I wanted to tell you that my term on the select board in Belmont is ending on April 1st.
Congratulations.
Well, I'm gonna miss it, but I'm not running for reelection, so. and I-
Congratulations again.
Well, I just also don't know that I'm going to continue as Belmont's representative to the advisory board, so
Okay.
I don't
Well,
think.
thanks, Roy. I'll be in touch and we'll figure that out.
Okay, so just because I can't say that, I can't take responsibility for the operating committee report.
No problem. We'll figure it out, Roy.
Okay,
Hopefully the board will see the wisdom in keeping you, Roy, but we appreciate your service over the years. Anybody
I'm happy to
motion?
move the slate.
We have a motion? Mr.
I'll make a
Glennon, second?
motion. Alec Hasseline of Brockton.
Second by Alex. Okay. Any questions on the motion? Seeing none? All those in favor of approving the slate, please signify by raising your hand or say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Oh, is that hand in opposition, Brookline, or is that Aaron, you okay? Okay. Okay,
Voted in favor,
seeing
but
that?
then it showed my hand automatically still up, so.
Okay, all right, no problem. Great, so all those in favor, we did it, right?
We did it, sir, and thank
Everyone's
you.
good? Thank you all for
yes.
committing, for your service, and I look forward to a robust year, particularly with all that's coming down legislatively from the governor, with the financing and all. I know we'll get into that in the next discussion. So thank you all for that. At this point, we're going to turn it over to Brian and give us an update. Appreciate his service on the committee that's been meeting for months to make recommendations to the governor. As we know, Governor Healey has gone public with a major plan, financial plan that we hope the legislature will see fit to adopt, if not all of it, certainly the main parts of it. With that, I'll turn it over to Brian.
Thank you, sir. And I hope that everyone can see on the screen the PowerPoint. As the mayor said, I was representing the advisory board on Governor Healey's Transportation Funding Task Force, which many of you have heard about the work that's happened over the last year. The body was organized through an executive order at the end of last January. We met for the first time a year ago in February. So after 13 months, we have concluded our work, and it was a real honor to represent the advisory board on that. I also want to note that our deputy director, Hannah Swidltowski, who's joining us, and Isabella McKinnon, when they started working with us in June, they also attended every one of these meetings, which I think was a great way to begin to sort of explain at a broader sense to them, and so that their perspective was incredibly important. Certainly, Hannah's an elected official in Sharon, and her perspective is great, and Isabella is a younger person, also has a great perspective, and I just wanted to acknowledge them. So the task force, as I mentioned, here's the picture of the press release or of the report's release last 2 weeks ago in Union Station in Worcester. It was a wonderful event with the media and the members. We were all there, and that night or the next night, the governor had us all as her guests at the State of the State. It was a really fun few days talking about transportation and talking about how we can fund it. And again, very grateful to you all for allowing me to represent you. So the report in the task force was chaired by Secretaries Tibbetts, Nutt, and Gerkowitz from ANF. Again, met 16 times. A lot of the work happened sort of around the periphery with individual discussions between members and between staff and between folks. A lot was done sort of that way leading up to the issuing of the report last month. And the report really had three areas of focus, as you can see here: stabilize, enhance, and transform. And when the whole process began, it was really unclear exactly where we would come out, if this would be sort of a Transportation Finance Commission style holistic approach, looking at everything and sort of coming up with a big number, or sort of coming at it more formulaic, and it wasn't clear where it was going to end. And I think through the process, we came to a good place. And in terms of stabilization, I think this is really important. The task force decided to not suggest any sort of major overhauls or transformations at present, but instead to focus on stabilization. And by that, I mean doubling down sort of on Phil Eng as a general manager. The T right now has a wonderful general manager. You've heard me say this before. Has a great board of directors. Chairman McGee, who spoke to us in December, is getting his feet under him as chair, and certainly has tons of experience. And so there's the task force felt, and the governor agreed that it really makes sense at this time to make sure that we continue that stabilization, not just at the T, but across our entire transportation network. You'll see that there's a proposal to increase Chapter 90 funding to cities and towns by 50%, and that's something that I was very proud to really focus on the task force and make sure that that municipal voice was heard. And also using the Fair Share Amendment money, which has really been a windfall for the Commonwealth. When we started the process a year ago, the projected revenue was around 250 million. And we were told sort of at the very end of 2024 that the actual number was around 2.5 billion. So that has really been a windfall for the Commonwealth, and that has sort of allowed us to make the recommendations we've made and allowed the administration to sort of put what they did in their House budget, which I'll talk about in a minute. The second part of the recommendations, obviously, here was enhance. And again, this was really thinking about what we have to do next. There is work to be done. Relying alone on the millionaire's tax will not necessarily be the long-term solution, but it certainly is a short-term solution. And the governor has said, and I have said, and I think we all agree, this is a first step, and we need to continue to build on the trust that is being developed by the T doing what it's doing through its track improvement plan, and the Department of Transportation doing what it's doing by getting some projects out the door. And as that works, and as the public begins to get a little more comfortable with investing in transportation by seeing that they're getting a return on their investment, we can begin to enhance through additional funding. And there are going to have to be some hard discussions that happen in the next 5 to 10 years around this. I don't think anyone thinks that that's not going to happen, simply for the fact that the gas tax as a revenue source is really going away. And as more people drive electric vehicles, and as our policy supports more electric vehicles, certainly in the Commonwealth, and the task force really wrestled with that. We're going to have to figure out another way to backfill what the gas tax currently generates, if nothing else, to pay off all of the bonds that the Commonwealth has issued. And then finally, this is really the transformation piece, the third piece. Figure out as we move into new technology through AI and through potentially automated vehicles for cars and for the T, looking at the future of how we do this. And there, during this whole process, New York City was going through its congestion pricing discussion, as I'm sure folks were aware. And there was a lot of talk about, should we look at that? Should we not? And I think where the task force came out on that was really, let's let New York run its experiment. It seems to be successful for them right now in terms of traffic mitigation and revenue generation. But let's not be the early adopters of necessarily of this. Let's let New York sort of run the traps, so to speak. And if it works, and if there is a desire to continue that, that's certainly something that we can look at once we've let them kind of make the early mistakes, if there are any. And so the governor, as you heard through House One, through her budget, is proposing to invest $8 billion across the transportation network over 10 years, mostly generated through the surtax revenue, the millionaire's tax revenue, as well as from interest on sort of some savings that have been generated through past millionaire's tax revenue. And through something called GANs, which are grant anticipation notices. There is $300 million in Chapter 90 for 5 years, and some other projects in there that you can see on the slide. For the T, it really solves its operating deficit for at least the next 2 years, possibly more, sort of depending on how the economy goes. And it gives it significantly more capacity to borrow money based on what the millionaire's tax will generate. So for the T, this was a big win. I've been very public in saying that while this is probably not ideal, nothing in life is. This is a really, really good step, and certainly something that I think we should support, and I've been very vocal about supporting. This slide here talks about exactly and specifically what the T is going to get out of the governor's proposal. You can see there's additional money for capital. There is additional money to the operating budget, which will stabilize it and get it out of deficit for the coming fiscal year and the fiscal year after that. And then allow it to make some continued investments to grow its workforce through the Federal Transit Administration safety review from a few years ago, continue the low-income fare program that this organization supported, and develop some additional programs. And sort of importantly for me, as someone who's worked on this for a long time, it will retire the T's legacy debt, which is about $89 million left on the books from sort of the Big Dig and the legacy projects from 30 years ago. So while it's not a ton of money, I think symbolically it's important. There's additional money here for the rest of the transportation network, which I'm happy to go through, but I'm not going to really focus on given our audience here. But there is additional money across bridges and roads and culverts. We spent a lot of time talking about culverts. RTAs get additional money, as does the Department of Transportation in general. So there are additional materials available here that folks can look at if they're interested. Happy to go into any detail that folks want to hear more about. The top line is that this is the start of a longer conversation, but it is certainly an important start. It's a win. We're going to take the win. With that said, it's now in the hands of the legislature. So the governor has filed House 1, as everyone here knows. It now goes to the legislature. If the House and the Senate will issue their own versions of the budget, and then that will get reconciled probably in the summer. Myself, Hannah, and Isabella have been spending an inordinate amount of time on Beacon Hill talking to legislators about not only the governor's proposal, but about the needs of the T to make sure that something that ultimately comes out works. In fact, we're going to talk to Senate Ways and Means later today. And so our work continues to try to make sure that this gets through. And who knows, right? The legislature will do what the legislature does. God love them. But something will come out at the end, and I think everyone agrees that that more money is needed for the T and transportation, and that money will be available. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions folks have. Again, this was a great experience, and I'm very grateful to each of you for allowing me to be your representatives on this task force. It was frustrating at times, but we got there in the end, and I'm glad we're there. So with that, sir, I'll turn it back to you.
Okay, I see we have Ramey's got her hand up.
Hi, I just have a quick question about the fair share tax. So I understand the governor's plan to do the investment, but I guess I'm curious as to what percentage of that fair share tax is going to the T? Because I know it's specified for other people are supposed to get that pot of money. I just was wondering what the percentage, these are big numbers, so.
Yes. So currently, it's about 57% towards education and 43% towards transportation. What the governor's proposal is to even that out and increase the amount of money to transportation to make it more 50-50, which is what the voters approved in the ballot initiative a few years ago. The T will get the lion's share of that, to be very honest with you, in this proposal in House 1. I don't know the exact percentage of the total amount of fair share tax money, but it is significant. But the important thing that the task force felt was that we needed to listen to the voters and get to that 50-50 ratio.
Anybody else? Questions? Maya?
Hi, everyone. Sitting in for Matt Moran today, who's out at a conference. I read through the task force report and couldn't find a deadline for that 50-50 split to happen. Did the committee recommend a year to aim for?
Yes, so I saw Matt's Instagram post this morning, flying off with great pictures of Boston. So we wish him well. So the governor agreed to make the 50-50 split part of House One, part of her budget. So while the task force report didn't recommend a timeline, the governor's budget and a supplemental budget that she's already filed with the legislature sort of tries to enact that in the next fiscal year, which will take effect July 1.
Susan,
Thank you very much. Have a number of questions. I'll limit it to three. And I do appreciate your time. And actually, I appreciate the governor and her administration taking this step to do this. I think it's always tough when you have to clean up a mess that's been out there for a really long time. So one of the things I was a little disappointed in, as this was, I believe, a 116-page report, but it only had one page on next steps and nothing really definitive on who was going to carry those next step forward. What is the timeline for that? So I'm wondering if you can speak to that. So that's my first question, next steps. The other thing, this is an idea, and maybe I'll be alone here, I don't know, but I'm curious is with this Chapter 90 funding, if we can somehow make sure that when those funds are used, that any municipality must work in partnership with their transit authority, whatever transit authority that may be, to ensure that bus stops become more accessible. I have seen numerous cases where we do road work and we actually decrease the accessibility of our bus stops. So I would like that to be considered. The other thing is, it didn't seem to me that right now the plan as it is, and I realize there's compromises, does much to fill transportation gaps. So in Lexington, as you know, we only get a tiny bit of MBTA service, and we've actually lost a lot over the decades, particularly since COVID, but even prior to that. We have folks that have to transfer to other types of services. It didn't say much about that. And the report mentions this term microtransit, which there are numerous definitions of microtransit. Some people refer to it as bike shares. Some people refer to it as on-demand microtransit like you see in Salem. Some consider Lexpress to be a microtransit. How are the people in this report defining that term microtransit? And I will leave it at that. And thank you for your time on this.
Well, thank you, Susan. Let me see if I can take those in order. With respect to next steps, so this was something that I think a lot of us were a little bit disappointed in as well, that served on the task force. There just wasn't a huge amount of support for really diving in deep into what the next steps must be. There was a sense that we should let the ongoing mobility planning that the Department of Transportation is doing and the program for mass transportation work that the Department of Transportation is doing on behalf of the T sort of be those vehicles, no pun intended, to sort of carry the next steps and do the longer term planning and thinking about what's happened. We debated a lot about whether or not we should take a stand or make recommendations. Ultimately, I think we came out on the side of being a little more cautious, letting the T and the DOT continue to demonstrate wins, continue to demonstrate that they are good stewards of the public's money and can get projects out the door. And I think that's sort of where we landed. I agree that we need to have the broader discussion and we need to start that immediately. And that's actually something that we're spending a lot of time internally talking about in the office. With respect to Chapter 90 and working with RTAs, I don't know. I know that when MPO projects happen, the T is involved and bus stops have to get upgraded as part of those projects. I don't know how the Chapter 90 process works in terms of what the DOT does. I imagine it's similar, or at least it should be. But I have to suggest or just say that I don't know. And let me look at that. And in terms of micromobility, I think the example that was most commonly discussed in the task force was the Quinsigamond connector out in Central Mass, and sort of getting folks from RTA buses to sort of health providers. I agree with you that there are gaps in the system. There was a sort of, in the very beginning, a lot of us spent a lot of time trying to figure out what the total amount of money that was needed to make the transportation system we want in the future be the reality and be the recommendation, but there just wasn't the support for that on the task force. And frankly, I don't think there is in the legislature. I mean, we've heard the speaker take taxes off the table. I think the governor's taken taxes off the table. So I don't think there's a lot of appetite for real broad-based taxation and revenue generation and spending right now. And so I think, where we tried to come out was a little bit around political feasibility as well as making sure that something that the governor would be happy with what we came up with. So hope I answered all of your questions, Susan.
Andy, you're up next.
Morning, everybody. Hope you all are staying warm. So I think, like Susan, I'm just so glad to see just of our immediate needs with respect to the T being resolved. I think the potential headwinds that we would experience because I think that trust is being rebuilt is definitely we're giving the resources to the organizations where they could use it. Brian, you started to speak to this, and I think I got a good sense of it, but I did want to get a sense of the conversation around where there's maybe shared or diverging interests beyond just resolving the immediate, like stabilize the T, stabilize the DOT, that conversation. I think you spoke to some of it with good stewardship and the hesitance about new spending. Are there areas where there were shared interests? I think that we could, use as foundations to continue the conversation from, not just where we diverge, right? Really, I think that's kind of what I wanted to get a sense from you sitting on this task force.
Yeah, and a good question. So I think the area where there was a lot of consensus was around the fact that the Department of Transportation is being well managed right now. The secretary is a strong leader. Certainly, Phil Lang is a strong leader, and it makes sense for us to give them the resources that maybe that they not all of the resources they need, but certainly the resources that are available, and let them continue to demonstrate wins. And I think it's a good strategy. We haven't necessarily had a very successful series of sort of project wins in this area in the Commonwealth in a long time. And I think what you're seeing with Phil Lang and the secretary and Jonathan Gulliver and the highway group, I mean, the highway folks are spending more money than ever before. They're fixing more roads and bridges and culverts than ever before. So there are wins taking place, and I think it's important that we see those wins, talk about those wins, and then use those wins as an example as to why these organizations are good to invest in and demonstrate return on investment for the taxpayer. So I think where we ended up, Andy, was there that we've got a good team in place. Let's continue to invest in them. Let's continue to grow the workforces, and let's continue to make sure that they have the resources that are at the very least necessary to keep doing what they're doing.
Roy, you're up.
Thanks. Brian, I think Phil Lang will go down as one of the most transformational leaders of the T, maybe ever. I just had a question for you regarding the operating budget. Our message to the MBTA board last spring was that reserves were being drained to handle the operating budget for this year, and I'm delighted that the additional tax revenue is available for operating for the next 2 years. But where does that leave the reserve position of the T? Is there any way to build that back up, or will it be subject to emergency appropriations if there's a problem in the next year or two?
So in the supplemental budget that the governor filed alongside House 1, there's a $300 million sort of transfer to the T to build back its reserves, to get its deficiency fund sort of building again. And while that number should probably be a lot higher, it's certainly better than zero. I think you'd agree. And there are also some proposed changes around the way the T can use the interest on those on those funds to meet some more immediate cash flow needs. So I think they heard us, Roy, and I think that there is certainly an attempt to build back the T's reserves that way.
That sounds great. In fact, you should even make that part of the press coverage that there is a real fiscal discipline there. So
yeah, absolutely,
that's good.
There really is.
Anybody else? Questions for Brian? Report, I do agree. This is a huge win for the T. Susan, I'm sorry, you said you were going to limit it to your three. You're back.
Well, if there's time, I'd
ahead.
like to ask one
Go
more.
ahead.
Okay, thank you. You know, I've always got a lot to ask. So on this theme of next steps, and you said you're having some internal conversations, Brian.
Mhm.
One of the other things I'm wondering about, it seemed to be there were some things that weren't mentioned in the report that that have been talked about before. One of which is, can we reconsider how we handle ADA paratransit? And that's not necessarily raising new spending. That's just sort of shifting how we do our spending. The other thing I would look at, particularly since there's a reliance on the fair share, which is for education and transportation, you know, I don't know the exact number across the state, but I imagine we're spending billions of dollars on school only transportation, when in some communities, not all, in some communities, we may be able to transition some of those funds towards public transit that everyone can use, that not only benefits students, but benefits teachers. Has that been considered? And if not, you know, how can we have those conversations? What's the next best step like for someone like me that really wants to dig into those things? Thank you.
So the a few things there. So school transportation, it came up. It also came up at MMA last week or the week before. So there are some proposed changes there, and I don't want to speak out of turn on that because I'm not an expert on school transportation. My kids walk to school. We're very fortunate. Um, in terms of statewide paratransit, I brought it up, Susan, to the task force and was sort of told that yes, it's something we need to look at, and then there was no follow through. So we just have to continue to beat that proverbial drum that it needs to happen and it needs to be considered. I'm not sure right now the best place to do that discussion, and it's I'm as frustrated as you.
Back to Boston. Oh, yeah.
Sorry, one last question. I know, Brian, you said there didn't seem to be support for broad-based taxation, but how do did you get a temperature check on fees, like increasing the TNC share or delivery fees for food delivery or private package delivery?
So I thought that's where we were going in the task force, to be very honest with you, and I thought that would be a big part of the final recommendations. I was part of the camp around November, December, saying fair share first, but not fair share only. Ultimately, we came down on the side of fair share only right now because it was so much more. There was so much more revenue there than was originally thought. So I think the thinking, Maya, is that we should use what we have, be good stewards of what we have, demonstrate to the taxpayers that we are good stewards of the money that they are giving us right now, and then continue to demonstrate wins and hopefully go back towards what might be available in the future. I heard Mayor Wu talk about registering and regulating delivery folks. I know that the town that I live in is very interested in looking at that as well. And so I think this is going to be evolving, and it's certainly something that we need to keep our finger on the pulse of, and ultimately probably look at that. But again, I'm not sure that Massachusetts or the T should be the leader in this right now. We tend to want to get out in front of all this stuff. Sometimes I think it's better to sit back and let other folks kind of as I said, run the traps, kick the tires, and then sort of come in at the end when it's all figured out. But that's where I'm at right now, and I think that's where we will probably get to in a few years. But I just think we're not there yet.
Okay, Brian, again, I want to thank you for your work on this. And I certainly want to publicly acknowledge and once again express our gratitude to the governor for taking a strong position on dealing with the funding issues, as we know the state's been struggling with for a long, long time, decades for that matter. It's a huge step forward. It's not perfect. It doesn't solve everything, but it's a huge step forward. And from my perspective in Quincy, I'm going to be attending a city council meeting and speaking to the council about what's happening with the T, the importance to make that connection, what it means to our city, and then encourage people to reach out to the legislators from our city to support this huge investment in really stabilizing and moving the T forward for many years. Pete, and I know there's some folks in the western part of the state who struggle with supporting money for the T, but in reality, the metropolitan Boston area is the economic engine for not only Massachusetts, but New England. And the T is a vital piece of that. And we got to keep that, we certainly got to keep that in mind going forward. So I know that if anyone's interested in doing what I just mentioned, Brian can be helpful with materials, with bullet points, etc. Or myself, I'd be happy to help anybody as well. But with that, again, thank you, Brian. This was anticipated for some time, and I think we're going in the right direction. With that, I don't see any of the questions on that. The last item, I believe, is our old business, new business next meeting. I think we've got some meeting dates, Brian, for the full board.
Yes, that will be shared, sir, this week. Just finalizing a few more committees and working with the MBTA folks on the operating budget calendar for them. But we have full board meetings planned for April, May, and June, as well as committee meetings through the summer. That will come out via email to everyone this week. And I appreciate your patience trying to balance everyone's schedules. Is not always easy, but we're trying and we're getting there and we're very close. I wish we had it for today, but we will certainly get that out to you this week. And thank you.
And just a reminder, we're going into that time of year where the full board meetings are important. We will be voting on CIPs and the annual operating budget will be coming up probably June, I would guess. So there'll be some meat on the bone in those meetings. So I'm pretty sure if you could put it in your calendar once Brian publishes that. So with that, any other questions or issues, Brian, from your end?
No, sir.
Okay. Seeing no further business before us, I'd wish everybody a good day. Hopefully, everybody's warm and cozy as we plow through this winter. With that, I accept the motion to adjourn.
Adjourn.
Second.
Okay, motion second. All those in favor of adjournment? Aye.
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 Opposed? Excellent. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye.